stepping onto a planet where strength is law and silence means weakness. No weapons, no backup, just one human standing alone in an arena built by predators. But instead of fear, she offers a story. Instead of violence, she offers memory. In a world where power is shown through scars and roars, she dares to change everything with a whisper. This isn't just diplomacy. This is the battle for respect, fought without a single blow. If you're new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The stars outside the shuttle window shimmered like distant lanterns as Nora Winter leaned back in her seat, eyes fixed on the jagged silhouette of a planet slowly rotating into view. Draxion. A place Earth's diplomats had only spoken of in briefings, always with a note of warning beneath the words. The home of the Kyrox, an apex species known throughout the galaxy for their strength, aggression, and complete lack of interest in peace. Until now. Nora adjusted the collar of her navy blue envoy uniform and glanced across the small cabin at Marshal Cohen, her escort. He sat stiffly, hand resting near his holstered weapon, his expression unreadable. He didn't trust this mission. Truth be told, neither did she. The Galactic Alliance had sent envoys to many planets before, but Draxion was different. The Kyrox were warriors, not negotiators. Towering scaled beings with claws sharper than steel and voices like grinding rock. They didn't build peace. They conquered. And yet, here she was, Earth's representative, sent to open dialogue and, if possible, secure a trade agreement for rare elements found only in the heart of Draxion's mountains. Earth needed those resources for deep space travel, and Nora was chosen not for her ability to fight, but for her ability to listen, and to speak when it counted. 5 minutes to landing, the shuttle pilot called out. The vessel began to tremble slightly as it entered the atmosphere. Below, Nora could already see massive stone towers rising like the ribs of some ancient beast. The capital city of Vorusk didn't welcome. It warned. Spires jutted into the clouds, bridges curved like claws between them, and the whole structure gleamed under a blood-orange sky. It was not a city designed for comfort, but for dominance. This doesn't look like a council hall, Cohen muttered as he peered through the window. Beside the landing pad, a circular arena sprawled across the red stone, filled with dozens of Kyrox, all watching the shuttle's approach in silence. Some leaned forward on their haunches. Others stood still, arms crossed, eyes glowing faintly with orange or gold light. Not one looked friendly. Nora took a deep breath. They're not here to greet a diplomat. They're here to size me up. The shuttle touched down with a metallic groan, the ramp descending slowly as a wave of dry heat and tension rushed inside. Nora stepped forward, her boots clicking on the metal floor. Her heart pounded, but her face remained calm. This wasn't fearlessness. It was control, and she would need every ounce of it. As she walked down the ramp, the crowd of Kyrox parted to reveal one who stood taller than the rest. His scales shimmered in black and rust red, his armor lined with old battle scars, and his eyes burned with a cold intensity. Grackmore, the leader of the strongest hunting clan on Draxion. Nora stopped a few steps from him and offered a respectful nod. Envoy Nora Winter of Earth, she said. Her voice was steady. Grackmore sniffed the air and grinned, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. You are smaller than expected, he rumbled. But perhaps more interesting. Behind him, several Kyrox chuckled, a sound that resembled boulders tumbling down a cliff. Nora didn't flinch. Earth doesn't measure strength by height, she replied smoothly. We measure it by how long we stand when others expect us to fall. That made Grackmore's grin widen, just slightly. Whether it was amusement or something darker, Nora couldn't tell. Marshal Cohen stood just behind her, tense but silent. His presence was a reminder. If things went wrong, he was there to protect her. But against a planet of warriors, protection would only go so far. Grackmore stepped closer, lowering his voice. You are not the first outsider to come here, human. But you may be the first not to beg for your life before leaving. Nora met his gaze, refusing to look away. Then I hope to be the first who stays long enough to understand. There was a pause. A long one. Then, without warning, Grackmore turned and gestured toward the wide stone corridor behind him. Come, you will speak. We will listen. Or not. Nora nodded and began to walk. Around her, eyes followed every step, judging, waiting. The silence of the Kirok said more than words could. This was no diplomatic visit. This was a test. But Nora wasn't here to prove humans could fight. She was here to show that they didn't always need to. The stone corridor stretched endlessly, dimly lit by glowing blue lines carved into the walls. Nora walked with calm steps, her mind racing even as her face remained composed. Behind her, Marshal Cohen moved silently, his hand never far from his weapon. Around them, the heavy footsteps of armored Kyroks echoed like distant drums. The deeper they went into the city, the more the walls seemed to press in, not with size, but with history. Every inch of this place spoke of battles, triumphs, and a way of life built on power. They finally entered a vast chamber that opened into the trial grounds. It wasn't a courtroom or a council hall. It was an arena. Open sky above, red dust below, and thousands of stone seats rising in circles around the center. Nora stood at the edge of the arena floor as more Kyroks filed in, their eyes sharp, some curious, others clearly waiting for her to fail. At the center of it all stood Grackmore again, now dressed in ceremonial armor made of dark bone and glimmering metal. On either side of him were elders, aged but strong, each one a symbol of survival. A younger Kyrok stepped forward from the crowd. His scales shimmered green and silver, and his expression wasn't as hard as the others. He bowed slightly toward Nora, a surprising gesture. I am Torak, he said quietly. I will speak your words to the council. But they are not here for talk. They want proof. Nora nodded once. Then I hope they listen before they judge. Grackmore's voice boomed across the arena. Human, this is not a trial by combat. It is a trial of presence. If you wish to stand among those who hold strength, you must show us what your kind calls power. No weapons, no tricks, only truth. The crowd grew silent. Nora stepped forward into the circle. Her boots touched the red dust. She could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes. She took a deep breath and began. She didn't talk about Earth's armies or ships. Instead, she spoke of a city once broken by disaster, where strangers helped each other rebuild. She spoke of a mother who lifted debris off a child, though she had no strength left in her arms. She told them about a young boy who crossed an ocean on a broken raft to bring medicine to his village. There were no battles in her stories, but there was something else. Courage without violence, strength without cruelty, and victory through care. Some of the Kyroks laughed at first, soft chuckles that echoed through the arena, but not all. As her words filled the space, even the louder ones grew quiet. They weren't used to hearing stories like this. Not here, not in a place built to honor dominance. Yet something in her voice held them still. Grackmore crossed his arms, unimpressed. Words. All species have them. Why should we value yours? Nora looked up at him, her voice calm. Because our strength is not in one warrior. It's in all of us. We don't survive because one person is stronger. We survive because we hold each other up when we're falling. Torak stepped forward, speaking in the Kirok tongue, repeating her words to the council. Some elders leaned in. Others remained motionless. Grackmore said nothing. Suddenly a voice rang out from the back. Strength is survival, nothing else. It came from a large Kyrok with black and bronze scales. He stepped forward aggressively, claws extended, ready to challenge her presence. Marshal Cohen moved instantly, but Nora raised her hand. Let me speak, she said firmly. She turned to the challenger. Your people are strong. You fight, you win, you endure. But what happens when your strongest falls? Who stands then? The Kyrok didn't answer. Not right away. I come from a planet where we've fallen many times, she continued. But we always rise again. Not alone, but together. That is our power. There was silence. A long silence. Then slowly, Torek stepped beside her. "Maybe strength is not only what we show in the hunt," he said, his voice low but clear. "Maybe it is also what we choose to carry for others." Some murmurs spread through the crowd. Disagreement maybe, but also thought. Grackmore's expression didn't change, yet something in his eyes flickered. Curiosity, perhaps, or the first crack in certainty. Nora didn't smile. Not yet. She had come to speak, and she had done so. But this was only the beginning. The arena may not have been a battlefield, but a war of beliefs had begun, and she had taken the first step without drawing a single weapon. The sun on Draxion dipped lower, casting long shadows across the arena as the trial neared its quiet turning point. Nora stood in the center of the dusty circle, the dry wind tugging at her jacket, her breathing slow and steady. Around her, the Kyrox remained still, their faces unreadable. She couldn't tell if they were impressed or waiting for her to make a mistake. Marshal Cohen stayed just outside the ring, watching every movement, alert but silent. He had been in dangerous places before, but never one where peace depended entirely on words. Grackmore finally stepped forward again. His heavy steps crushed the dust beneath his feet. He stared down at Nora, his tall frame towering over her, his claws hanging loosely by his sides. "You speak well, human, but stories do not build nations. Words do not stop blades." His voice carried across the arena like thunder. "Do you believe kindness alone will keep you alive?" Nora didn't look away. "No," she replied softly. "But I believe understanding can prevent the need for violence. That's more powerful than fear." Grackmore's eyes narrowed. "Power must be shown. Power must be claimed." He raised one clawed hand and gestured toward her. "Kneel, and perhaps we will see you as clever prey rather than foolish enemy." There was a stir in the crowd. Even Cohen's hand drifted toward his weapon. But Nora didn't flinch. She looked at Grackmore for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately lowered herself to one knee. Gasps echoed through the arena. For the Kyrox, kneeling meant submission. It meant defeat. But then Nora did something unexpected. She reached into the pocket of her jacket and pulled out a small, smooth object. A black stone, no bigger than a coin, polished to a soft shine. She held it up in her open hand. "This is a memory stone," she said. "It was passed down in my family for 7 generations. It came from the first colony ship that crashed on a frozen moon. Everyone thought they would die. But they didn't. They worked together. They shared what little heat they had. They lived. This stone carries their memory, and every person who held it added their own. It is a symbol of survival, not because of force, but because of unity." She stood and walked forward, extending the stone to Grackmore. "I offer this not as a weapon, not as tribute, but as proof that strength comes in many forms." Grackmore stared at the stone, unmoving. The arena was silent. Then Syrah, the historian, stepped forward from the council seats. She was older than the others. Her scales faded with time, but her eyes were sharp. She looked at the stone, then at Grackmore, and spoke with careful words. "The trial was meant to show what power the humans hold. She has shown us power that does not come with blood. The question now is, are we willing to see it?" There was a shift in the atmosphere, subtle but real. The audience, once still and cold, now seemed unsure. Some nodded. Others looked away. Torek, who had been quiet since his earlier words, stepped beside Nora again. "She may not fight as we do," he said, "but she has faced us without armor, without fear. That deserves respect." Grackmore's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, without a word, he took the memory stone from Nora's hand. His claws wrapped around it gently, as if unsure of its weight. He looked at it, then back at her. "This stone has no sharp edges," he said, "yet it holds the weight of generations." He turned slowly, holding the stone up to the crowd. "Perhaps we have been blind to a different kind of strength." No cheers followed, no roars of approval, just silence, a heavy, thoughtful silence. The balance had shifted, not completely, not yet, but something old had cracked. And through that crack, the first light of a new understanding was beginning to shine. Night fell gently over the towering spires of Vorusk. The sky turned a deep violet, stars blinking into view one by one, like quiet witnesses to what had taken place in the arena hours earlier. Nora sat alone on the stone steps just outside the trial grounds, her mind still processing everything. The trial was over, but nothing had been settled officially. No treaties had been signed. No declarations had been made. And yet something important had changed. She could feel it in the air, in the way the Kyrox no longer looked at her with pure contempt, but with a flicker of thought, maybe even respect. Inside the council chamber, Grackmore stood before the circle of elders. His presence filled the space, but this time he carried no weapon, no armor, and no aggression. In his hand, he still held the memory stone Nora had given him. He turned it over slowly as he spoke. The human came without threat. She faced us with only stories and a symbol from her people's past. She showed no fear, even when she should have. That is not weakness. The oldest elder, Rukan, studied Grackmore from beneath heavy eyelids. You once said all strength must be taken. Have you now changed your mind? Grackmore hesitated, then nodded once. Perhaps not all strength is shown by taking. Perhaps some is shown by giving and still remaining whole. Back outside, Nora stood as Torak approached her. His stride was slower than before, less rigid. He looked at her without challenge now. You were brave to come here, he said. Braver still to speak as you did. Nora gave a small smile. It wasn't bravery. I was afraid. I just didn't let it decide for me. Torak looked thoughtful. We have not had a visitor change the mood of our people in many seasons. I think the others are starting to ask questions. That alone is rare. Nora nodded. Sometimes peace begins not with a speech, but with a question. Soon after, Grackmore called for one final gathering at the arena. Not a trial, but a ceremony. Nora stood at the center once more, but this time not alone. Torak stood beside her, along with Sira and several elders. The seats were filled with Kyrox again, but the mood was different. There was no tension, no growling undercurrents, just silence. Watching. Waiting. Grackmore stepped forward and held the memory stone high in the moonlight. This is what the human gave us. A stone that holds stories, carried by those who chose to remember, not to rule. We have not known such things. We have not cared for them. But we should. He turned to Nora. You asked for access to our lands, for safe travel through our space, for trust. That cannot be given in a day. But today, I offer this instead. Recognition, not as prey, not as a guest, but as one who dared speak differently in a place where difference is rare. There was no applause, no dramatic roar, only silence. Then slowly, a low hum began to spread through the crowd. It was the Kirok way, an old tradition of silent agreement. One by one, warriors and elders placed a claw to their chest. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't a pledge. It was acknowledgement of her strength, of her voice, of her place. Nora didn't move. She let the silence wash over her, stronger than any sound. She felt no need to celebrate. This wasn't victory. It was something better. It was the beginning of something new. As the stars above blinked quietly, Marshal Cohen stepped up beside her. So, he said softly, did we just make peace without a single weapon? Nora smiled, her eyes still on the crowd. No, she whispered. We made peace with silence, and with that, the envoy from Earth stood not in the shadow of warriors but among them, not as a fighter but as a reminder that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and sometimes that's enough to change a world.